Good day. This week we shall be taking up the lecture module on pathology of the respiratory tract, specifically the lungs. The module will consist of 4 parts based on topics outlined, and majority of the contents of the lecture are derived from your prescribed textbook Robinson Cotran Pathologic Basis of Disease 10th edition. Remember, the lecture series will only point out the important facts that should be learned by the student, but the other minor details still need supplementary readings on your part. Let me share a quote from an Irish writer, Richard Steele, saying that reading is to the mind what exercise is to the body. My name is Dr. Maria Josefa Messina, your faculty lecturer for this respiratory pathology module. This slide would serve as a guide for the student as far as the learning objectives a student should be able to attain at the end of the lecture module. So please go over them silently. So, to reiterate the topics for this lecture module, the topics are grouped into 4 parts and be guided accordingly as to the content under each lecture part. Before we start the lecture proper, it is always nice to review the anatomy of the respiratory tract and its important physiologic makeup. The respiratory system is divided into 2 regions: the upper airway, which refers to all structures located above the glottic opening. The lower airway refers to the structures below the vocal cords and into the lungs. The lower airway is further subdivided physiologically into 1. Your conducting airways, which comprise of the trachea, bronchi up to the terminal bronchioles, continued by your respiratory portion, which comprise of your respiratory bronchioles, alveolar ducts, and alveoli. The respiratory portion or respiratory unit of the lungs, wherein gas exchange takes place, comprise of your alveolar epithelium, predominantly of flat type 1 pneumocytes that cover 90% of the alveolar surface area for gas exchange and are easily injured. The cuboidal type 2 pneumocytes or alveolar cells cover the remaining 10% of the alveolar surface area and are more resistant to injury. The type 2 pneumocyte or alveolar epithelial cells have several critical functions, including surfactant production and ion transport. They also function as progenitor cells for regeneration of type 1 cells after injury. This is a picture of a more or less non-pathologic healthy lung wherein you see a smooth, visceral pleural surface. The minimal black specks or markings on its outer surface represent anthracotic or carbon pigments, usually seen in individuals residing in urbanized areas due to exposure to air pollution. Comparing the healthy lung to the pathologic lung as seen on the right side, the lung shows intense blackening of the lung parenchyma and scarring of the lung tissue as seen by the uneven and puckering of its outer visceral pleural surface. Take note of the hyperinflated lung parenchyma representing the pathologic lesion of emphysema. So we go next to what symptoms exhibiting by an individual that we may say that we should focus on most likely pathology in the lungs. So the first symptom is dyspnea. If the lungs makes us breathe, having shortness of breath may be a sign of lung disease. Shortness of breath is observed, let's say, when you have recognized or maintained your endurance level during a regular exercise regimen, then suddenly you feel shorter or shortness of breath with activities that you do not experience this manifestation. This may be an early sign of compromised lung function. Okay. Next is cough. uh, Let us be reminded that our lungs has no pain receptors in it. So if you have chest pain, most likely something happening outside the lung. What the lung has is an abundant amount of cough receptors, which we know cough is a protective reflex, and naturally the number of cough receptors um, are present in order that the lungs will cough out whatever material it doesn't want in. Okay, so however, cough becomes pathologic if it becomes persistent and chronic, and if associated with excessive sputum production. And lastly, hemoptysis, characterized as coughing or spitting of blood that may originate usually from the airways, such as your bronchus or bronchi, usually indicates infection and inflammation that damages the lining of your bronchial tree. Congenital lung disorders are rare. As you can see from the pie graph, it represents 1.4% of congenital disorders of the entire human anatomy. However, despite their rarity, they are considered important disorders because they may lead to considerable morbidity and mortality, such as infection, hemorrhage, and respiratory failure. Its prognosis would depend on the size of the lesion and the degree of functional impairment. Pulmonary hypoplasia is defined as incomplete development of either one or both lungs, and usually seen in babies delivered premature before 28 weeks of gestation. Pulmonary hypoplasia results from any condition that restricts lung growth, such as congenital diaphragmatic hernia and oligohydramnions. This is a gross specimen of the lungs. Here you can see a small, underdeveloped lungs for gestational age with reduced lung weight to body weight ratio. Foregut cysts arise from abnormal detachments of the primitive foregut and are seen most often located in the hilum or middle mediastinum. Its mechanism of development is unknown. Many are asymptomatic, but incidental findings may be seen on chest X-ray. Depending on the wall structure of the foregut cysts, these are classified as bronchogenic, which is the most common, esophageal, and enteric. Grossly bronchogenic cysts appear with delicate thin-walled cysts. The lining is smooth and composed of pseudostratified columnar ciliated epithelium. Usually, the clinical course of these cysts may come to attention when they cause dyspnea, atelectasis, or hyperinflation with obstructive symptoms. Pulmonary sequestration refers to lobes or segments of lung tissue
without a normal connection to the airway system, and its arterial blood supply is from the aorta and its branches, and not from the pulmonary arteries. Pulmonary sequestration can be classified into two based on location. One, extralobar sequestration are external to the lung and seen in infants presenting as mass lesions. Number two, intralobar sequestration occur within the lung and are seen in older children presenting with recurrent localized infection or bronchiectasis. We are done on the discussion of congenital disorders of the lungs. We go to the next topic, which is atelectasis. Atelectasis refers to loss of lung volume due to incomplete expansion of the lungs, such as that seen in neonatal atelectasis, or collapse of a previously inflated lung referred to as acquired atelectasis. The main types of acquired atelectasis comes in three forms based on its mechanism of acquisition. Number one, resorption atelectasis, also known as obstruction atelectasis. This occurs from complete obstruction of the airway over time. Air retained distal to the occlusion is resorbed from non-ventilated alveoli, causing the affected regions to become totally gasless and then collapse. The obstruction can occur at any level of the larger or smaller bronchus. Causes of obstructive atelectasis include foreign body, tumor, or mucus plugging. Number two, compression atelectasis occurs when significant amount of fluid, example, blood, effusions, solid material, example, tumor, or air accumulates in the pleural cavity and displaces or compresses the lung tissue. With compression atelectasis, the mediastinum will shift away from the affected lung. Third is contraction atelectasis, occurs either focal or generalized pulmonary fibrosis, preventing full expansion of the lung parenchyma. As seen in the diagram, in resorption atelectasis, the mediastinum shifts towards the atelectatic lung. Airway obstruction may be caused by excessive secretions or mucus plugs or exudates within small bronchi, such as your pulmonary condition seen in bronchial asthma and chronic bronchitis. It may occur in post-operative states, especially those under general anesthesia, wherein there may be retention of secretions, and this is the rationale that post-operative patients are encouraged to take deep breathing exercises to re-expand the patchy atelectatic areas. Compression atelectasis results whenever pleural cavity is partially or completely filled by fluid, exudate, tumor, blood, or air, such as in pneumothorax or tension pneumothorax, when air pressure impinges on and threatens the lung function and the mediastinum, especially the major vessels. Mediastinum shifts away from the affected side. Contraction atelectasis occurs when local or generalized fibrotic changes in the lung or pleura prevent full expansion of the lung tissue. Among the three forms, resorption and compression atelectasis is reversible, meaning as long as the underlying cause is corrected, lung tissue can re-expand, while in contraction atelectasis is an irreversible disorder since scarring or fibrosis of lung tissue causes permanent non-expansion of lung tissue. This is an example of a gross appearance of an atelectatic lung, as seen by the dark red violaceous color of the lower lobe or lower segment of lung tissue. The clinical implications of atelectasis are the following. It may result to reduction in oxygenation, and atelectasis may predispose to respiratory infection. We go to the next topic, which is pulmonary edema. Pulmonary edema is defined as escape or leakage of fluid from the vascular compartment into the alveolar space and interstitium, resulting from hemodynamic disturbances or microvascular injury. This is a table wherein pulmonary edema is classified based on the underlying mechanism or cause. The first category is hemodynamic edema associated with disturbance of your Starling's forces, specifically increased in hydrostatic pressure, such as in the case of left-sided heart failure. For the second category, this is due to alveolar wall injury, which can either be direct or indirect injury to the alveolar wall. Direct injuries such as infections in the case of bacterial pneumonias, inhaled gases, and radiation, while indirect injury can be in the cases of septicemia, burns, drugs, and chemicals. The third category is edema of undetermined origin, such as in high altitudes and neurogenic causes. The picture on your left is a gross picture of the lungs with pulmonary edema. The lungs are wet and heavy, and frothy fluid, as you could see, oozes from its cut surface. The picture on your right histologically shows you the alveolar walls or septae, demonstrating stasis or congestion of red blood cells within the dilated alveolar capillaries. The alveolar spaces are filled with pinkish homogeneous material, which is your edema fluid. Next is your acute lung injury, also known as non-cardiogenic pulmonary edema. It's characterized by abrupt onset of significant hypoxemia and bilateral pulmonary infiltrates in the absence of cardiac failure. Acute lung injury is a disorder of acute inflammation that causes disruption of the lung endothelial and epithelial barriers. Meanwhile, ARDS, or your acute respiratory distress syndrome, is the clinical manifestation of severe acute lung injury, wherein you have progressive respiratory insufficiency, and this is almost always associated with inflammation. Hence, the two important initiating events of acute lung injury is damage to endothelial and alveolar epithelial cells and the presence of inflammation. So this is a list of conditions associated with the development of acute respiratory distress syndrome. Your Acute lung injury is usually viewed as a complication of several underlying conditions, which can either be a direct injury to the lung or a systemic disorder. This list shows the various conditions associated with the development of ARDS, wherein the ones tagged with an asterisk are the common conditions that give rise to acute lung injury. Acute lung injury results from loss of alveolar capillary membrane integrity, excessive transepithelial neutrophil migration, and release of pro-inflammatory cytotoxic mediators. In the acute phase of the syndrome, seen on the hand side of the diagram, there is sloughing of both the bronchial and the alveolar epithelial cells, with the formation of a protein-rich hyaline membrane on the denuded basement membrane. Neutrophils are shown adhering to the injured capillary endothelium and marginating through the interstitium into the airspace, which is filled with protein-rich edema fluid in the airspace. An alveolar macrophage is secreting cytokines interleukin 1, 6, 8, and 10, and tumor necrosis factor alpha, which act locally to stimulate chemotaxis and activate neutrophils. Interleukin-1 can also stimulate the production of extracellular matrix by fibroblasts. Neutrophils can release oxidants, proteases, leukotrienes, and other pro-inflammatory molecules, such as your platelet activating factor. The acute phase of acute lung injury may go two ways. It may resolve with no sequelae in some patients, while the others progress to a more protracted phase of persistent respiratory failure that is characterized clinically by persistent hypoxemia and decreased lung compliance, and histologically by fibrosis, along with acute and chronic inflammation and partial resolution of pulmonary edema. This picture shows the gross and histologic features of acute lung injury. Grossly, the lungs show diffuse involvement with a firm, non-crepitant and rubbery consistency. Diffuse alveolar damage is the histologic feature of acute lung injury as a result of the culmination of the disease process. Inflammation as seen by the presence of scattered neutrophils and macrophages, necrosis of the alveolar epithelial cells, and the formation of the hyaline membranes are the histologic features seen in diffuse alveolar damage.
Let us take the case of coronavirus during the height of the COVID pandemic way back 2020, wherein mortality was quite high due to ARDS. Statistics have shown during the height of COVID-19, about one-fifth of all infected patients progress to this stage of disease and develop severe pulmonary symptoms. The virus invades and enters the type 2 alveolar epithelial cells via the host receptor ACE2 and starts to undergo replication to produce more viral nucleocapsids. The virus-laden pneumocytes now release many different cytokines and inflammatory markers such as your interleukins, your tumor necrosis factor, your monocyte chemoattractant proteins, and macrophage inflammatory proteins. And this is what you call your cytokine storm, which acts as a chemoattractant for neutrophils, your CD4 helper T cells, and CD8 cytotoxic T cells, which then begin to sequester in the lung tissue. Although these cells are responsible for fighting off the virus, but in doing so are also responsible for the subsequent inflammation and lung injury. The host cell undergoes apoptosis with the release of new viral particles, which then infect the adjacent type 2 alveolar epithelial cells in the same manner. Due to the persistent injury caused by the sequestered inflammatory cells and viral replication, leading to loss of both your type 1 and type 2 pneumocytes. Hence, this epithelial injury causes or leads to diffuse alveolar damage, eventually culminating in an ARDS syndrome.
The clinical course of acute lung injury is variable and depends on the nature of the causal process. Factors which may influence mortality is the patient's age and extent or severity of the multi-organ dysfunction.
The references are
References are
listed for
listed
your
for your
guidance.
guidance.
Please read your
Please
book.
read your book.
Thank you.
You
Good
may
day
proceed
and
to
be
the
safe,
next
everyone.
lecture series. Thank you, good day, and be safe.